Hello all, this is Randall Root, and in this video we're going to take a look at how you create reports using MDX queries and SSRS. So in the video series, just previous to this, been looking at MDX programming in general, and various different ways you can use the commands. That works fine in a query window, where you're going through and you're typing in your code, you're running it in an environment like SQL Management Studio. And you want to query the server, so I'd go through and write a new query. Make sure I'm in the right database. And then the syntax in MDX, of course, is select on columns, on rows, from. And then it's just a matter of choosing what you want to select. So like I want to select maybe, I don't know, how about the sales units on columns, and I want to display on rows. Let's see what products we have. And from that cube, we highlight the code, execute it, and so we get some results. Yeah, not very exciting. A little better. So once we have our query written and we've tested, etc., how do we use it? The thing is, you're not going to give your end users a copy of Management Studio and say, go get them. That's not going to happen. Of course, you can use Management Studio to make queries. So yeah, how do you use it after you get a query, get your database made? And you can indeed go over and browse it. You can go to the browser, and you can use this. The nice thing about the browser is I can go through and drag and drop, and it writes the MDX queries for me. Sales units, sales dollars, products, and I can get a tabular report like this. That's great. That's great. Um, we could go through and also add in like the sales ID, so we can see the actual breakdown of when these sales occurred. Microsoft kind of realized that this would not be something that people would normally gravitate towards. So they did give you this cool little feature where you can click on this button. This came out in 2012, and it will open up Excel with your MDX query behind the scenes. Which I think is kind of cool. So that's kind of a neat thing. It's Excel is pretty good. You can do all kinds of things. Like I can change, like here where it says row labels, I can change to something else. And certainly one of the cool things about it is that especially if you simplify this, I could easily go through and make like charts out of it. That's kind of neat. So Excel has a lot of great features. It is a client-side technology in that the Excel software has to be installed on each client because that's where a lot of this is taking place. Now, the data coming from this is actually defined over here in the properties. It is hard-coded to be stuck at the cube name, so that's why we see the command text here. And although it'd be cool if I could just paste the code in, and it'll give me error at that point, because it's really expecting the name of the cube. And that's why you're getting all of the items on the from the cube over here in the tree. Still, Excel is a nice piece of software, but it does have some limitations in that regard. So if I want to actually run just the code I want to run, is there a tool to do that? And the answer is yes, yes there is. I can go through and use SSRS, and SSRS SQL Server Reporting Services comes in two basic flavors. The first flavor is where you go through and you take um, Visual Studio. This is 2012. The icons are all grayed out and flat. 2010, of course, is the normal one I would use. But 2012 works as long as you've installed the data tools. And then I just go through and add in a new project. Let me see if I can get this on the screen. So I just click on the solution icon and go add in new project. And when it comes up, I go to Business Intelligence and choose Reporting Server. Now there's either the Wizard or the Report Project. I'm going to go ahead and choose the Report Server Project. The Wizard's alright, but I'm not going to want to do that. And I should give it some cool name like, oh, I don't know, Simple Sales Reports. Now after that's done, you just go ahead and right click and add a new item. Now you'd think you'd add a new report. The problem with that is it starts with the wizard again. And it's not so much that the wizard's bad. It's just that it's somewhat limiting. So I'm going to actually do it the direct way. I'll say add a new item. And once again, they seem to offer me the wizard way too often, but I'll choose report. I should also give it a name like sales report or something like that. And in here, you go through and you create a data source that connects back to your database server. So we need to connect to analysis server because we're trying to run MDX code. We put in the name of our server. I'm going to go ahead and just choose localhost. Remember, localhost or local in parentheses or the dot all should work unless you're using a named instance. And then you choose the database name. Now remember, people get confused that a cube is like a table, so there can be many cubes in a database. In this case, we're using the sales cubes with an S. Okay, that should be good. Now, we have a data source, which is really just a saved connection string. The next thing to do is add a data set. Well, we probably should give this a better name too, but I'll just go ahead and say I want to use a data set embedded in my report. And what that means is that the MDX code that we're going to paste in here is actually going to be in the code of the report itself. I'll show you where that's at in just a bit. We choose the data source we just made, and I recommend to hit refresh fields. Hitting refresh fields will either give you an error message. Is supported on a data reader of this data provider only at query design time. Interesting. Okay, I'll hit query design and I'll run that. Looks like that's a 2012 thing. Whatever. So now we're getting some values. Looks like we're going to have some doctoring to do, but at least we've got our code to run. Now, if you didn't see where I went over here to the query designer, and this is actually a pretty sweet little query designer. It's a little bit nicer than what we've seen. So, for example, let's say I want to add in the KPI. Okay, looks like I want value. Come on now. Oh, I got to switch over. I'm sorry. I got to switch over to designer. Yes, thank you. I forgot that this little triangle here is the designer. Okay, let's try this again. There's my KPI, and I want to see the product listing. And now I can, I can make a KPI status report. And behind the scenes, it's actually writing the code. Now, unfortunately with this, it doesn't write, great code. A lot of it's just fluff. For example, this is all bogus. I don't need this part. Let's see. I do want that. Select non-empty, KPI goal, KPI status, on columns, non-empty, on rows. Okay, now we've got a legitimate looking MDX statement. It still should run. So if you know MDX enough, you can clean up your code, etc. Or you could just, it won't hurt to have the extra metadata in there. It just looks pretty unprofessional, if you ask me. You need to hit refresh fields. The reason for that is it basically does a final syntax check. It also records some metadata about things. Okay, and then if I go to solution, this is report data, and you need to do this in report data. If for some bizarre reason report data doesn't show up, click on the background of your report, so anywhere outside this line, and go view. Report data be the last, oh, you can't see it in the video. Okay, let's try again. View, report data is the last menu item, and that'll make it show up. It seems to be better in this version, but occasionally what happens is that you can't see that. It's like, hey, where's report data? Right click, or left click, focus, view, report data, and it'll show up. I think actually in the standard setup, I think it's on the left. So I've just moved my tab over to the right. Okay, now I'm going to go over and take a look at the underlying code. What happens when we create these data sources and data sets? Like here's the data source. It's just a named connection string. And here's the data set. It is also just a named something. In this case, is a named MDX statement. So that's what's happening when you go through and you use that visual tool to create, let's see, report data, the data set and a data source. And once you have that done, the next thing you do is you make reports off of it. And for that, you need the toolbox. So I can go through and put in like a text box and put in sales report. I think this is going to be a very ugly report. And I can make it bold. I can go through and choose some colors. I love that. It's black and white for the colors button. I think they went a little bit overboard on this. Oh. Let's see what else we got. There we go. And I think I'll use a tabular report. And once I drag the tabular in, I can just go through and say product and my calculated sales value, my goals, and looks like I need another column. Insert column to the left. Oops, wrong place. Let's try that again. Goals, and then I want status. I think I'll add another column to the right, and that's for something like an image, which is a kind of a common thing. Basically, if you want to do like a KPI report, you could put an image in here, and then depending on which KPI status, you display a particular image. So that's the way that people would use it. You'd have to write a piece of code there, and I'm not going to show you that in this particular video. So, it, but if you're interested, look on the internet for reporting server and KPI reports, and you'll see that yeah, it's not too bad. You typically what they call trinary if, and you just tell it that if a particular status is true, go ahead and show one image. If it's not, show another. Or you can use a select case or switch case to, in your code. So okay, so now the queue was never named. The dimensions stuff were never really named properly, and because of that, it says product ID. When I hit the preview button, I'll see that I'm actually looking at product names. Oops, come on, preview. Boy, it shouldn't take that long. Let's try again. There we go, finally. I'm looking at actually product names. There's some other things I should do, like calculated sales. Those are actually sales dollars. The sales goal, and of course, the we reach our goal. So I would go in here and I'd start changing this around. I'd say product name or something like that, and calculate. How about sales total? And let's see. I'll change this over to sales goal, and I'll say let's see here. One for bad. I'll have to go look at the KPI and see what's going on with that. 0 for good, or something that would make sense. I don't think the KPI doesn't look like it's really set up well. And at that point, I could also go through and do some basic formatting. And then we'll switch over to preview and see if it looks any better or what. Looks like we need some formatting on like the sales goals and sales totals. So what I'll do is I will right click on the edge of this text box. This is actually a text box, and when it comes up, I'll go to the property sheet. I go to number, and I'll set it to be currency. I think I'll do the same thing with this one. So properties, number, currency. If you've ever used Excel, this is very, very similar. Right. So I want to is there anything good I could put in here? Well, I could put a function here, but then I'd have to go down and write the code that if it's 0. Let me see here. I'll go to common functions, program flow, immediate if, or switch statement. And you can see here, if something is true, then do one thing or the other. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I do like the fact they let you steal the code. Always nice. Actually, I think if I remember right, in this one here, it's got IntelliSense, so that's cool. So we can go through and say um, if fields we're looking for calculate KPI status is equal to 0, then green, else red. I think I'm using way too much red. Okay, I think that's going to work. Now let's see what it looks like. Yeah, it worked. I don't have any zeros in there, so none of it's green. And by the way, that's the same way you do with the image, etc. If you're interested, you just put in a statement like that. But that should give you an idea of how people could use MDX. And if you want to change the MDX or need to change the MDX, you can. You just come back to report data. You double click on the data set. You hit the query designer. You modify your code, test it, and then when you're done, you just go through and hit refresh fields, and that will update the metadata behind the scenes. So it's not too hard. Once this is done, you would normally be able to go ahead and publish the report out to typically an intranet site. So this would be uploaded to a web server someplace. You do not need to do that for anything like a demo that you make, or in real life. You could actually just even send an RDL file to somebody else. And the reason for that is Microsoft has also included as a free download kind of a client-based report server tool, development tool. It's called Report Builder. And if you just do a search on Report Builder, you'll see. And what it does is it allows you to go through and create reports very simply in a more modern ribbon-based interface. Also, if somebody had sent you a report, you could just go ahead and open it. So let's say that I made this beautiful report and I go ahead and copy that report. I'll just copy the RDL file. I could send it to somebody. Guess I'll put it on my desktop to imitate sending it to somebody. Okay, so now I have sent it to myself. And in Report Builder, I can just go through and say open a saved report, look on my desktop, find the report. Now, as long as the connections are still good and the query still works, in other words, I can contact the server this thing points to, they could use this. And I could always change the connection if necessary. But they could run it and see the report that you had sent them and print it out. In fact, one thing cool about this tool is that you can actually export it in a bunch of different ways. So this report builder is a free download, and besides, if they don't like the colors you've chosen, if they think, like, I'm thinking maybe I have a little too much red in there, they can just go through and change it. So it gives them kind of a halfway in between measure of working with the data. In Excel, you get a lot of cool features. You got the pivot table report, and you basically have to, it's a do-it-yourself kit. You have to do it, make the report all yourself. Now, of course, you can make the query and make the report and then send it off to somebody. Report Server in Visual Studio is made to be a developer tool, so end users wouldn't use this. It's considered too complex. End users would use the self-service aspect of Excel to create their own reports. And the report builder is kind of middle of the road. It's for advanced users, certainly, but you could use this to create and view report server pages. So it's kind of halfway in between Excel, in that it can be self-service. and halfway in between the development tools, because you can actually, at the end of the day, if you're done with making changes to the report, you can upload it to the actual server. It is it's a pretty sweet little tool. So anyway, that's a lot to take in, but hopefully it gives you a pretty good idea of how report server works and how MDX queries can be used. In this case, like if I double click on the data set, I can still get into the query builder and modify my code, etc. So even MDX is used simply in this particular free download, and you don't even need to have Visual Studio or reporting server installed in order to use this report builder, which is really kind of a neat little extra free add-on. Anyway, I hope that gives you an idea of how MDX could be used in the real world. As you can see, a lot of the time you use the designing tools to build the MDX. I think that's because Microsoft recognized very few MDX programmers out there. But it is helpful to know the basics of MDX because the code that it writes, well, all right, isn't necessarily great. And you can tweak it and tune it a little bit, just make the code a little bit more legible, a little bit better, if you know the basics of MDX programming. Okay, thanks for watching. Take care.